Frankly, your presence would lower the tone for our top clients." The words just dangled there in the space between us, like a cloud of poison gas. I was standing, frozen, in the doorway of Gregory's office. The professional, polite smile I had perfected was still fixed on my face, but somewhere deep inside, I felt a sharp, cracking sound. My boss, Gregory Vance, leaned back into his expensive Danish ergonomic chair, pressing his fingertips together in that way he did. He had an expression I knew all too well, a mask of phony sympathy that did a poor job of hiding his smug sense of victory. "I just don't believe you're quite at that executive level yet, Ava," he went on, his voice pitched just loudly enough for the curious people in the open plan office to hear every word. "Crestwood Isle Resort is a highly exclusive place. Our clients have an expectation of a certain refinement." His eyes did a quick, dismissive scan over my very sensible charcoal blazer and my practical, comfortable heels. The sheer irony of it all would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. Crestwood Isle Resort. It was my father's masterpiece, the crown jewel of his empire, named for my mother's family. It was the place I'd spent my childhood summers, learning how to swim and helping the housekeeping staff fold laundry. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say thanks for listening. Have you ever been made to feel small, even when you know you're giving your all? This story is about a skilled marketing director who faces that exact kind of prejudice at work. If you love stories about turning the tables and claiming your power, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it helps our channel bring more stories like this to you. Okay, let's dive in and see what happens when Ava's boss learns who he's really been dismissing. My name is Ava Sterling, and I'm the daughter of Edward Sterling, who the financial papers like to call the reclusive hospitality magnate. Of course, not a single person at Momentum Media had any idea about this, and that was exactly how I wanted it. "I understand," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Thank you for making that clear." As I walked back to my desk, navigating the gauntlet of co-workers who were suddenly intensely focused on their screens, pretending they hadn't heard a thing, I kept my posture ramrod straight. It was another lesson my father had taught me. "Never show them a moment of weakness, Ava," he used to say. "The second they sense you're wounded, they'll move in for the kill." 4 years ago, right after I graduated at the top of my class from business school, I made a choice that baffled everyone who knew my real story. Instead of stepping into a guaranteed leadership role within the Sterling Hospitality Holdings empire, I took a mid-level marketing job at a relatively small agency. My father had been confused, but as always, supportive. "Chart your own course," he'd told me. "That's a luxury my money should be able to give you." I'd seen how his immense wealth had slowly isolated him. People were either trying to get something from him or were too intimidated to ever act like themselves. His 3 failed marriages were proof of how money could poison the well of human connection. I was determined to find out if I could make it or fail based on my own abilities. I wanted to know that any friendship I made, any respect I earned, was real. My apartment, located in a perfectly nice but far from trendy part of the city, was comfortable but forgettable. My 7-year-old Toyota was dependable, but certainly not impressive. My closet was filled with well-made basics, not flashy designer brands. To me, these weren't sacrifices. They were deliberate choices that lined up with my core values. Gregory Vance, on the other hand, saw my lack of expensive status symbols as a sign of my lack of drive. Or maybe he thought it meant I just wasn't very good at my job. The Viridian Cosmetics mock-ups need a full rework. It was Laura from the accounts team, dropping a thick folder onto my desk and yanking me out of my thoughts. Gregory needs them by tomorrow morning, the Viridian campaign. It was my baby. The client had already signed off on the final designs last week. These so-called revisions were just Gregory's way of keeping me buried in busy work, too distracted to stew over being cut from the retreat. "Of course," I said, with a professional nod. This was a game I knew well. Just last month, my entire strategy for the Vortex energy drink launch was presented by Gregory himself, who conveniently forgot to mention my name once. The month before that, I was suddenly taken off the final pitch meeting for a major retail account after I had single-handedly developed their rebranding plan. Gregory had a special gift for undermining his team members without ever leaving a trail of direct evidence. The women's beauty accounts, the household cleaning products, all the softer brands, they always ended up with me, no matter how many times I proved my expertise with our tech and finance clients. My computer chimed. It was an email from Eleanor Reed, the brand new VP of Client Relations. "Can you pop by my office around 4? I'd love to pick your brain about Zenith. Incredible work. ER." That single email was enough to send Gregory into a spiral. Eleanor had sat in on my presentation about digital transformation strategies the week before and had asked a series of sharp, insightful questions. Unlike Gregory, she had openly praised the depth of my research and the creativity of my approach. That one small moment of genuine professional respect had felt like a cool drink of water in the desert. Gregory had seen the exchange, of course. His eyes had narrowed as Eleanor and I got into a deep discussion, and he'd made a point to hover nearby when she complimented me afterwards, shoehorning himself into our conversation. As I started pulling my notes together for my meeting with Eleanor, I saw Gregory watching me from his glass-walled office, his expression shrewd and calculating. He'd been on edge ever since I landed the Zenith Dynamics account. They were a huge tech firm that had specifically asked for me to lead their project after seeing my work for a smaller startup. Winning Zenith should have been a huge victory for the whole agency. Instead, Gregory had immediately assigned Kyle and Ben to support me. "You'll need the backup on this one, Ava," he'd said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's a major account for someone at your level." Kyle and Ben were both junior to me in both title and experience, but they were card-carrying members of Gregory's inner circle, the ones who got invited for golf and after-work drinks. Putting them on my project wasn't about support. It was about dilution. It was a blatant attempt to split the credit 3 ways if we succeeded, and to have 2 convenient scapegoats ready if things went south. Eleanor's office door was open, and she waved me in with a smile that felt real. "Ava, come in. I was just looking over your Zenith proposal again. The way you've integrated AI predictive modeling with classic consumer psychology is just brilliant." For the next half hour, we had the kind of deep, meaningful professional talk I'd been starving for. No office politics, no ego, just a pure and exciting exchange of ideas. When she mentioned she wanted to get more involved in the Zenith account, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Was it hope? "Gregory mentioned you won't be joining us at the retreat next week," Eleanor said as our meeting was wrapping up. "That's a shame. Your perspective would be really valuable to have there." My carefully constructed professional armor almost cracked, so Gregory was already spinning his narrative, probably hinting that I wasn't up to snuff. "Yes, unfortunately I won't be able to make it," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. "Well, we'll have to sync up when we get back," she said, her smile still seeming genuine. "I see incredible things in your future here, Ava." As I walked back to my desk, I saw Gregory coming out of a conference room with Kyle and Ben. The three of them were laughing. They stopped abruptly when they saw me, and a look passed between them. "Ava," Gregory said, his voice artificially cheerful. "The guys and I were just spitballing some new ideas for the Zenith campaign. We're thinking of pivoting away from your original concept, something a bit more dynamic, a bit more cutting edge. We can talk it over when I'm back from the retreat." And there it was, the same old pattern. The retreat would happen, I wouldn't be there, and decisions would be made behind my back. My work would be repackaged and presented by someone else. But not this time. This time was going to be different. Crestwood Isle Resort wasn't just some random luxury hotel. It was my family's legacy. It was my history. My mother's family name was literally carved into the stone at the entrance. As Gregory walked away, I made up my mind. For 4 years, I had hidden myself, rejecting my own privilege in a quest for some kind of pure, authentic success. But maybe it was time to step into the light. But I would do it on my own terms. I took out my phone and sent a text to a number I almost never used. "Dad, we need to talk about the company trip to Crestwood Isle next week. I need a favor." My dad didn't call me back right after my text. That was normal for him. He was probably in the middle of some high-stakes negotiation or taking his evening swim in the private cove at our family's main residence. I'd learned over the years to be patient with his response times. Running an empire was a 24/7 job. So I put my phone away and forced myself to focus on redoing the Viridian campaign mock-ups that were already perfect. The next morning came with a crisp autumn breeze. I was at my desk by 7:30, a good hour before most of my coworkers, when my phone buzzed with my father's reply. Interesting timing. That resort was specifically requested by someone at Momentum. "Call me after your all-hands meeting this morning." A chill ran down my spine. The monthly all-hands meeting was at 10 a.m., but I hadn't told my father about it. Of course, he already knew. That was classic Edward Sterling for you. Always 3 steps ahead, with access to information he shouldn't possibly have. It was both incredibly impressive and, even for his own daughter, a little unnerving. By 9:55, the main conference room was packed with the entire Momentum media staff. I chose a seat in the middle of the room, visible enough not to seem like I was hiding, but far enough back to avoid any direct attention. Gregory stood at the front, practically vibrating with excitement, while his assistant Julia was setting out little branded gift bags on a table. "Good morning, team!" Gregory's voice boomed with a practiced, theatrical energy right as the clock hit 10. "Before we get into our departmental reports, I have a very special announcement that I have been dying to share with you all." He clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared on the giant screen. It was a breathtaking aerial shot of a lush green island with perfect white sand beaches and a stunning architectural wonder built into a cliffside. My heart did a little flip. I knew that exact photo. I had helped select it for the Crestwood Isle Resort brochures 4 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, as a reward for our outstanding Q3 performance, Momentum's top performers will be attending a 4-day executive retreat at the world-renowned Crestwood Isle Resort. The room buzzed with excited chatter. Crestwood Isle was famous for its exclusivity. The waiting list for a regular room was months long, even for the super rich. Celebrities came there for the privacy, tech moguls for the security, and world leaders for the discretion. An ordinary person could never dream of stepping foot on that island. For those of you who might not know, Gregory continued, clearly loving his role as the bearer of good news, Crestwood Isle is consistently ranked as one of the top 3 most exclusive resorts on the planet. Standard rooms start at $6,000 a night, but we won't be staying in standard rooms. He paused for dramatic effect. We will be in private villas. There were audible gasps and more whispers. I sat perfectly still, my face a mask of neutrality, while my mind was racing. This wasn't just any sterling property. This was the flagship, my father's pride and joy. It was the resort where I learned to snorkel, where I knew the head chef Antonio still made my favorite lemon tart whenever I visited. This is a massive networking opportunity, Gregory stressed, clicking to the next slide. A number of industry titans will be staying on the island during our trip. The connections we could make might just reshape Momentum's future for years to come. The next slide showed a list of the attendees. I scanned it quickly, then did a double take. My name wasn't on it. I read it again, certain it had to be a mistake. The list had all the department heads, the whole executive team, several mid-level managers, and even a few junior employees who were Gregory's known favorites. But Ava Sterling was nowhere to be found. As he clicked past the slide, Gregory's eyes met mine for a split second. A tiny, triumphant smirk played on his lips before he quickly looked away and started talking about logistics. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. Departure is next Thursday. Julia has put together welcome packets with all the info, he finished, gesturing toward the gift bags. If your name was on that list, please grab your packet on your way out. The rest of the meeting was a complete blur of reports and projections that I couldn't process. All I could think about was my missing name and the smug look on Gregory's face. When the meeting was finally over, I watched as my colleagues excitedly snatched up their tropical-themed gift bags, all of them carefully avoiding my gaze. I waited until the crowd thinned out before I walked over to Gregory's office. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I knocked on his open doorframe. "Do you have a second to talk about the retreat?" I asked, using the pleasant, non-threatening tone I had mastered for navigating office politics. "Ava, of course, come on in," Gregory said with an overly friendly welcome, but he didn't get up. And he didn't close the door. That was the first red flag. I noticed my name wasn't on the attendee list, I started, keeping my voice level. Considering I'm leading the Zenith account and my team exceeded our quarterly goals by over 20%, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't an oversight. Gregory's fake warmth evaporated, replaced by something colder and more honest. "It wasn't an oversight, Ava. This retreat is for team members who really embody Momentum's executive image." "I'm not sure I follow," I said, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "How do I put this diplomatically?" He leaned forward, keeping his voice just loud enough for people nearby to overhear. "Frankly, your presence would lower the tone for our top clients. Your work is..." He hesitated for a second, searching for the right word. "Sufficient. But your overall presentation just doesn't have the polish we need when we're trying to impress high-value contacts." Every single word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to hurt while giving him plausible deniability. It wasn't explicitly discriminatory, nothing I could take to HR, just a devastatingly personal attack disguised as professional feedback. "Your presentation style is basic," he continued, warming up now. "The retreat involves formal dinners, executive mixers. Your lackluster presence and frankly your uninspired wardrobe would be a poor reflection on Momentum." I felt a hot flush creep up my neck, but I kept my face impassive. I was acutely aware of the pairs of ears in the cubicles nearby, all pretending not to listen, but soaking in every single word. "Maybe you can use the time to work on developing a stronger executive presence," Gregory suggested with a sickeningly helpful tone. "Perhaps invest in a more professional wardrobe? Those sensible shoes and off-the-rack blazers are fine for client meetings here in the city, but Crestwood Isle is a whole different league. The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. I probably knew more about the dress code at Crestwood Isle than anyone in this entire building. I had helped write the damn thing. "I appreciate the feedback," I said, my voice rock solid despite the rage boiling just beneath the surface. "Is there anything else I should be focusing on while you're away?" "The Viridian revisions, of course. And maybe get a head start on the Wilson holiday campaign? Nothing too strategic. Kyle can handle the big picture stuff when we get back." He waved his hand dismissively. "That'll be all, Ava." I walked back to my desk through what felt like a corridor of silent judgment. My coworkers suddenly found their phones fascinating or became deeply absorbed in their computer screens as I walked by. No one looked at me. No one offered a single look of sympathy. And in that moment, I made my final decision. For 4 years, I had downplayed my background, denied my connections, and tried to earn respect on merit alone. And where had it gotten me? Shut out, undermined, and publicly humiliated. I took out my phone and sent a second text to my father. "Let's make some arrangements for next week. But we're doing it my way." It was time for Gregory Vance to learn a very important lesson about whose caliber he had been so quick to judge. That evening, my apartment felt different. It seemed smaller, as if the walls were closing in, heavy with the weight of the day's humiliation. I kicked off my sensible heels, threw my inadequate blazer over the back of a chair, and poured myself a generous measure of the 30-year-old single malt my father had given me for my last birthday. It was the one luxury I allowed myself behind closed doors. The whiskey burned in a pleasant way as I took a sip and just stared out at the city lights. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Dad. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to sound normal but hearing the tightness in my own voice. "Ava." His tone was soft, but I could hear the sharp edge underneath. "What's this about the retreat?" I thought the whole point was to keep work and family separate. I slumped onto my couch, suddenly feeling the full exhaustion of the day. "That was the plan," I said, until my boss told me I didn't have enough caliber to go to a retreat at our own resort. The words just spilled out, sharper and more bitter than I'd intended. Dad was quiet for a long moment. I could picture the look on his face, the one where his eyes would narrow and a muscle in his jaw would tighten. It was the look that made his business rival sweat. "I'll handle it," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "One phone call, and this Gregory person won't just be uninvited from the resort. He'll be uninvited from his job. Number." I sat up straight. "That's the last thing I want. I've spent 4 years trying to build a career without you pulling strings. And look where it's gotten you, disrespected and shut out." "It's gotten me real-world experience," I shot back. "If you step in now, you invalidate everything I've worked for. I have to handle this my way." The line was quiet again, except for the faint sound of ocean waves on his end. He was on the terrace of the main house, probably watching the sun set over the ocean. "What are you proposing?" he asked at last. "Let them come to the resort." "Let everything play out," I said, a plan starting to form in my mind as I took another sip of whiskey. "But I need Marco to know I'm coming, and I need the presidential villa." Dad let out a short laugh, his mood changing instantly. "The presidential villa? The one you helped design? That's a $30,000 a night reservation, Ava." "Exactly." For the first time all day, a real smile touched my lips. "And Dad, I need you to promise you won't tell them who I am. Let me handle the reveal." "Now that sounds like the Ava I know," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "The presidential villa is all yours. I'll have Marco prepare everything just the way you like it." After we hung up, I couldn't bring myself to sleep, even though I was exhausted. Instead, I opened my laptop and started to document everything. I meticulously recorded every instance of Gregory's discrimination, every backhanded compliment, every stolen idea, every project he'd reassigned. By 2 a.m., I had a detailed file covering 4 years of subtle and not-so-subtle mistreatment. The urge to just quit on the spot was overwhelming, but that would be an emotional reaction, not a strategic one. Gregory didn't just need to lose an employee he clearly didn't value. He needed to learn a lesson. And momentum, for all its problems, had good people who deserved a better leader. Maybe, I thought, as I finally drifted to sleep, this could be a chance to make a much bigger change. The next week was a masterclass in self-control. Gregory seemed to get a special kind of pleasure from discussing the retreat plans right in front of me, often pausing his conversations to ask me a pointed question. "Ava, we're trying to decide between snorkeling and sailing on the first day. What do you think?" "Oh, wait," he'd add with a smirk. "You won't be there, so you don't have to worry about it." Each time I just gave him a polite smile and went back to my work. My total lack of a visible reaction seemed to agitate him, which only made him try harder. "This Viridian campaign is passable," he commented, dropping my revised mock-ups on my desk. "Why don't you work up some alternate concepts while we're away? It should be nice and quiet for you to focus." "Of course," I replied. "Anything else you need before you leave?" My calmness seemed to throw him off. He was clearly expecting tears or a dramatic resignation, not this steady professionalism. By Wednesday, just a few days before the retreat, he had piled 4 more projects on my desk, all with urgent deadlines that conveniently fell right after the team was due back. The biggest disappointment, though, came from Eleanor. After our great conversation, I had held out a sliver of hope that she might question why I was excluded, or at least try to keep our professional connection going. But instead, she started to actively avoid me. Twice, I saw her literally change direction in the hallway when she saw me coming. When we ended up in the same meeting, she would address her comments to other people, even when she was directly responding to a point I had made. It all came to a head on Thursday afternoon when I went to her office to talk about the Zenith timeline. "Not a good time, Ava," she said, not even looking up from her computer. "Just send me an email. I'll look at it after the retreat." "I thought you wanted to be more involved with Zenith," I said, keeping my voice even. She finally looked up at me, her face a carefully constructed blank slate. "Priorities have shifted. Gregory feels the account needs a more executive-level approach." I see. And I really did see. It was crystal clear. Eleanor had done the math. Siding with the excluded employee was a bad bet. Sticking with the boss was the smart career move. Corporate politics 101. "Nothing personal," she added, already turning back to her screen, dismissing me completely. The sting of that betrayal was sharp, but it was also clarifying. This wasn't just about Gregory anymore. It was about an entire culture that rewarded all the wrong things. By Friday morning, the office was buzzing. People were comparing what resort wear they'd bought and which sunscreen they were packing. The break room table was covered with brand new sunglasses and sun hats as people showed off their hauls. No one came near my desk. No one met my eyes. I kept my composed smile in place while I was secretly confirming the final details via text with Marco, the resort manager who had known me since I was a little girl. Everything was ready, just as I'd asked. That evening, I got a secure email from my father. It contained dozens of stunning, high-resolution photos of the presidential villa's recent renovation. It was a project I'd actually consulted on during my last year of college. The floor-to-ceiling windows, with their view of the private beach, the infinity pool that looked like it poured directly into the ocean, the 6 incredible bedroom suites, each one themed after a different sterling property around the globe. I studied every picture, mentally walking through the space where Gregory's world was about to be turned upside down. The grand entrance hall with its 20-foot ceilings, the open-plan living area where they would be served welcome champagne, the exact spot where Marco would make the introduction that would detonate everything. As I packed my own suitcase, not for the commercial flight the Momentum team was taking, but for my father's private jet, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. For 4 years, I had tried to hide who I was, desperate for a validation that was never going to come from people who judged you by the label on your blazer instead of the quality of your ideas. That was all over now. I wasn't just taking back my name, I was taking back my worth. My phone lit up with one last text from my dad. Jet is fueled and waiting. Presidential villa is prepared to your specifications. Marco sends his best and says revenge is a dish best served with an ocean view. I smiled and typed back a simple reply. Tell him I prefer it served with clarity. Tomorrow, Gregory Vance would finally understand exactly whose caliber he had so foolishly questioned. The morning arrived with what felt like perfect cinematic clarity. The sky was a brilliant blue, a gentle breeze was blowing, and the sunlight seemed to be illuminating possibilities instead of just harsh realities. The private Sterling jet was waiting on the tarmac, its sleek design both familiar and, in this new context, strangely empowering. For the first time in 4 years, I was about to step fully into both of my worlds at once. Ava, the marketing strategist, and Ava Sterling, the heiress to a global hospitality empire. Welcome aboard, Miss Sterling. The flight attendant greeted me with the kind of warm professionalism that was unique to our long-serving staff. It's so good to see you again. Thank you, Gabriella. How is your son doing at university? Her face lit up with a genuine, surprised smile. He's loving the engineering program. I can't believe you remembered. Of course I did. Please tell him I send my best. This was the difference between a real connection and a performance. I genuinely cared about our employees and their families, something Gregory, for all his talk of executive presence, would never be able to fake. The 3-hour flight was a time of peaceful, focused preparation. Instead of my usual inadequate work clothes, I had chosen an elegant but understated white linen sundress, gold sandals from a small Italian artisan, and a single piece of jewelry, my mother's sapphire necklace, which perfectly matched the signature blue of the Sterling brand. Nothing was flashy, but everything was quality. The entire look was designed to say, "I belong here," without having to shout it. Marco was waiting for me on the private airstrip when we landed, his familiar grin as bright as the Caribbean sun. "Little Ava," he exclaimed, giving me a warm hug before he stepped back to look at me. "Not so little anymore, I see. Your father tells me you've become some kind of marketing wizard." "Hardly a wizard," I laughed. "Just hardworking and consistently underestimated." "A very powerful combination," he said with a wink, offering me his arm as we walked toward a waiting golf cart. "Now, tell me precisely how you want this little drama to unfold. Your father mentioned something about a well-deserved comeuppance for a few special guests." For the next hour, Marco and I went over the choreography for the afternoon's big reveal. The Momentum team was scheduled to arrive at 2 p.m., which gave us plenty of time. I showed him a picture of Gregory so he would know exactly who my boss was, explained the office dynamics I wanted to expose, and I made one thing very clear. I don't want anyone fired, and I don't want the retreat to be ruined. This isn't about destroying things, Marco. It's about recalibration. Understood completely, Marco nodded. Although I have to admit your father sounded a little disappointed when I told him you specifically requested that we not accidentally lose your boss's luggage in the ocean. We both shared a laugh. My dad's protective streak was the stuff of legends. By 1:30, I was in position in the resort's magnificent main lobby, partially hidden behind a huge, spectacular arrangement of tropical flowers. The spot gave me a perfect view of the entrance while keeping me out of sight. Marco was at the front desk, going over last-minute details with his team, occasionally catching my eye and giving me a subtle, reassuring nod. At exactly 2:07 p.m., the main doors swung open and the Momentum media team spilled into the lobby, their faces flushed with a mixture of excitement and humidity. Gregory was leading the pack, his designer sunglasses perched on his head, wearing a tropical shirt that still had the fold lines from its original packaging. Behind him were the other executives, the department heads, and finally, Gregory's hand-picked junior favorites. "This," Gregory announced dramatically, spreading his arms wide as if he had personally built the resort himself, "is what true luxury feels like." From my hiding spot, I watched my colleagues stare in awe at the soaring, hand-carved ceilings, the panoramic views of the ocean, and the priceless collection of local art. Phones came out immediately as everyone started taking selfies and videos, documenting their arrival before they'd even checked in. "Remember, everyone?" Gregory's voice echoed through the lobby. "We are representing Momentum. I've personally been to several Sterling properties before, and I can tell you, their standards are incredibly high." I had to suppress a smile. I knew for a fact that Gregory had never stayed at a single Sterling property. Our extremely low digital profile and invitation-only booking system made it a common lie, but one that was very easy to disprove. "The owner himself is famously particular," Gregory continued, his lies getting bigger and bolder. "Robert Sterling and I actually chatted about marketing strategy when I ran into him in Aspen last winter." My eyebrows shot up. My dad hadn't been to Aspen in at least 5 years, preferring our own properties in the Southern Hemisphere during the winter. The sheer audacity of his lie was almost impressive. "When you talk to the staff, remember that they've served A-list celebrities. Just act like you belong here," he instructed, puffing out his chest. "Speaking of which, Jennifer Aniston stayed at this very resort last month. We had a great chat by the infinity pool. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud." Jennifer Aniston had indeed stayed at the resort recently, in the very presidential villa that was waiting for them. But the resort's strict privacy rules meant no other guest would have been allowed anywhere near her private pool. Gregory's fantasy was about to have a very rude collision with reality. Marco caught my eye and gave me the slightest of nods. It was showtime. He walked toward the group with that perfect blend of deference and authority that had made him a legend in the luxury hotel world. "Welcome to Crestwood Isle Resort. I am Marco Rossi, the general manager. We are so delighted to have Momentum Media with us today." Gregory immediately puffed up and stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Gregory Vance, president of Momentum. I believe my assistant confirmed our arrangements for the executive oceanfront villas." "Indeed, Mr. Vance," Marco said with a polite nod. "However, there has been a rather significant upgrade to your accommodations." Gregory's expression shifted to one of smug pleasure. He probably thought his name-dropping had already earned them some kind of special treatment. Marco continued, "If you'll just give me one moment to welcome." He paused, his eyes scanning the lobby as if searching for someone, before they landed on me. "Miss Sterling." I stepped out from behind the flowers, feeling every single eye in the lobby snap in my direction. Gregory's face was a picture of confusion as Marco walked right past him and gave me a warm, familiar hug. "We have been so eagerly awaiting your return," Marco said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent lobby. "Your father called me himself to ensure everything was prepared to your exact specifications." The silence was deafening. I could practically hear the gears grinding in my colleagues' heads as they tried to process what they were seeing. "Thank you, Marco," I replied, matching his volume. "It's wonderful to be home." Gregory's face went through an incredible series of transformations in just a few seconds. Confusion melted into disbelief, which then morphed into pure, horrified recognition. The color drained from his face so fast that for a second I was actually worried he was going to pass out. "Ava?" he managed to choke out, his voice barely a whisper. I turned to face him, a pleasant, easy smile on my face. "Hello, Gregory. Surprise." He took a clumsy step backward, bumping hard into the marble reception desk. A staff member reached out to steady him as he gripped the edge of the counter for support. "But you... how? Sterling?" he stammered, his eyes darting back and forth between me and Marco in a state of growing panic. Marco, ever the consummate professional, just carried on as if this was all perfectly normal. "Everyone, if you would please follow me to the presidential villa, which Miss Sterling has so graciously reserved for your company's use." The presidential villa? It was Eleanor who spoke first, her voice full of shock. "Yes," Marco confirmed with a cheerful smile. "It's the crown jewel of our property. $30,000 a night, though of course there is no charge for Miss Sterling's personal guests." As Marco began to lead the stunned, silent group toward the waiting line of golf carts, I fell into step right beside Gregory, who was still visibly struggling to breathe. "Don't worry," I said quietly, just for him to hear. I wouldn't dream of lowering the tone. After all, this is what true luxury looks like. The walk through the lobby felt completely surreal. I strolled beside Marco, perfectly at ease, while my colleagues trailed behind us like a confused herd of sheep. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw their attitudes shifting in real time. The same people who had been avoiding my gaze for weeks were now desperately trying to catch my eye, offering up nervous little smiles and waves. Kyle, who had been assigned to support my Zenith project, was staring at me so hard that he walked straight into a marble pillar. Ben, the other junior exec on my team, was whispering urgently to Eleanor, who just nodded dumbly, a fake smile plastered on her face. Gregory was shuffling along a few feet behind everyone else, his breathing heavy and ragged, as if he'd just run a race instead of walking across a lobby. The man who had commanded every room at Momentum now seemed to have physically shrunk, his shoulders slumped as if he was trying to disappear. The transformation was so dramatic, I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. Almost. "Your golf carts are waiting," Marco announced as we stepped out onto a covered pavilion where a fleet of luxury electric vehicles was lined up. "Miss Sterling, will you be riding with me in the lead cart?" "I'd be delighted," I replied, and I noticed Gregory take an automatic step forward before he realized the invitation wasn't for him. He shrank back as Marco held the door for me. Our little convoy snaked through the lush tropical grounds, following paths I knew by heart. As we passed a specific grove of hibiscus flowers, I turned to Marco. "The hibiscus grove looks incredible. Sophia's team has done an amazing job this season." "She will be so happy you noticed," Marco replied. "She still talks about how you helped her design the native plant restoration plan when you were just a teenager." From the back seat of our cart, I heard a little gasp. It was Laura, our HR director. I caught her expression in the side view mirror. It was a look of dawning comprehension. She was realizing that my knowledge of this place wasn't something I had crammed from a brochure. As we drove on, I pointed out other things to Marco, knowing my voice would carry. I see Dad finally put in that meditation deck I suggested by the East Cove. The location is perfect for the sunrise. Your design insights are always valued, Marco said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The architects still refer to your college thesis on integrated luxury spaces when they plan renovations. Every casual comment was another nail in the coffin of their old perception of me. They were all rapidly learning that my connection to the Sterling brand wasn't just a name, it was foundational. I had helped build the very paradise they were so desperate to get into, the exclusive world they had decided I was unworthy of. Our procession finally arrived at the presidential villa. Its stunning architecture seemed to rise out of the cliffside, offering breathtaking three-sided ocean views. A line of staff was waiting for us in a formation I recognized as our highest VIP protocol, the same greeting reserved for heads of state and A-list celebrities. "Welcome to your home for the next 4 days," Marco announced as he led the group into the massive main hall, with its 20-foot-high windows and exotic wood detailing. "Miss Sterling has arranged for the entire villa to be at your disposal." The collective gasp was audible as my colleagues took in the sheer, staggering luxury of the space. The infinity pool that seemed to pour into the horizon, the museum-quality art, the multiple living areas with their custom-made furniture. "Marco, would you mind if I handled the room assignments?" I asked, taking the villa's control tablet from his hand with a practiced ease. "I have a few thoughts on which spaces would be best for each guest." "Of course, Miss Sterling," he said, and I could just barely detect a hint of a conspiratorial smile. I started tapping on the tablet with a deliberate, casual air. "Let's see. Julia and Laura, you'll be in the Ocean Master Suites." Their eyes went wide. Those were the two most coveted suites in the entire villa. "Kyle and Ben, you two will have the coral suites with the private plunge pools." One by one, I assigned the most spectacular rooms to the junior staff members who had always shown me basic kindness, working my way up the corporate ladder in reverse. I saw Eleanor's face fall slightly when she realized she was getting one of the smaller garden suites, though it was still a room that would be considered obscenely luxurious by any normal standard. Finally, only Gregory was left. "And Gregory, you'll be in the service suite," I said with a pleasant smile. What I didn't say was that this particular room, while perfectly comfortable, was originally designed for the personal staff of visiting VIPs. It was the only room in the entire villa that didn't have an ocean view. It overlooked the service entrance. "The staff will show you to your rooms," I continued smoothly. "Please take some time to freshen up. We'll meet for cocktails on the main terrace at sunset, and dinner will be at 8. As the group began to disperse, Gregory came up to me, wearing the desperate smile of a drowning man who thinks he sees a log floating by. "Ava, Miss Sterling, might I have a word with you? In private?" I led him over to a small seating area, partially hidden by some tropical plants. I deliberately chose a spot where we could still be seen, but not overheard. "Ava," he started, his voice shaking, "I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding." "Really?" I said, keeping my face a perfect blank. "Please, explain." "My decision. About you not coming on the retreat. It wasn't what it looked like." He leaned in, his eyes darting around nervously. I was actually trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I repeated, letting just a hint of genuine curiosity into my voice. "Absolutely." His confidence seemed to build as he thought I was buying it. "I had a feeling. I suspected you might have a connection here, just an intuition I had. I was worried that if the others found out about your family, they might try to take advantage of you professionally." The sheer audacity of the lie was almost breathtaking. I just held his gaze and said nothing, letting the silence hang there between us. And that comment about caliber, "You completely misinterpreted that," he said, his voice getting more desperate. "I meant that you were above the caliber of a normal corporate retreat. You're too sophisticated for this kind of thing." When I still didn't say a word, he added, "I've always valued your contributions, Ava. Always." I let that lie hang in the air until the silence became almost physically painful. "How interesting," I said finally, and then I stood up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go check on the dinner arrangements." The rest of the evening played out exactly as I had planned. The welcome dinner was served on the main terrace as the sun set, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. The executive chef, who had taught me how to make my first crème brûlée when I was 12, created a special 7-course menu featuring local ingredients and classic Sterling dishes. During the meal, I found myself actually enjoying the looks of shock on my colleagues' faces as I casually discussed wine pairings with the sommelier, identified the subtle flavors in each dish, and shared little stories about the artists whose paintings hung on the villa's walls. This wasn't a performance. These were the real parts of myself that I had kept hidden at Momentum so I wouldn't stand out. Across the table, Gregory just picked at his food. He tried to jump into the conversation a few times, but his comments fell flat. His usual loud, arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by the painful awareness that the entire corporate hierarchy he relied on had been turned completely upside down in a single afternoon. By the time dessert was served, everyone in the room had gotten the message. Real power doesn't need to shout, and true accomplishment can't be faked. The real Ava Sterling had finally arrived, and she wasn't hiding anymore. The final morning of the retreat dawned with a clarity that felt symbolic. For 3 days, my colleagues had been navigating this new reality, each adapting in their own way. Some of the junior team members had truly blossomed, suddenly finding their voices in an environment where their ideas were being heard. Others, especially those who had been Gregory's closest allies, kept a wary distance, unsure of where they now stood. Gregory himself had become a shadow of his former self. He showed up to the scheduled events with a quiet, almost timid demeanor. His usual domineering personality had completely vanished, replaced by a man who seemed afraid of his own shadow, or more accurately, afraid of mine. I was going over the day's schedule with Marco when his expression suddenly changed to one of pleased surprise. He looked past me toward the villa's entrance and gave a respectful nod. "It seems we have an unexpected guest." I turned and saw my father walking through the grand doorway, his commanding presence instantly filling the room. Even at 62, Edward Sterling was an impressive figure. He was tall and fit, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that could size up a business deal or a person's character with equal speed. "Dad?" I said, genuinely surprised. We had agreed that he would stay away and let me handle this on my own. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, giving me a warm hug before turning to greet Marco. I saw my colleagues at the breakfast tables freeze, the recognition slowly dawning on their faces. Edward Sterling almost never appeared in public, but his face was unmistakable. "I hope you don't mind me dropping in," Dad said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I just couldn't resist coming to see how Momentum Media was enjoying our humble little place. "Not at all," I said, playing along with his humble description of the $30,000 a night villa. "We were just about to have breakfast. Would you like to join us? I'd be delighted." The meal that followed was a masterclass in subtle power. My dad was perfectly polite as I introduced him to each person, but his gaze lingered just a little bit longer on the people I had privately told him were Gregory's enablers. When Gregory finally worked up the nerve to approach with a shaky, outstretched hand, Dad's handshake was brief, and his smile never reached his eyes. "Remarkable property you have here, Mr. Sterling," Gregory said weakly. "Thank you," Dad replied, "though I must apologize for our communication system. The microphones in the villa have been surprisingly sensitive lately. We've been picking up some interesting conversations. Something about the caliber of attendees, I believe." He glanced at me with a raised eyebrow. "A technical glitch we're trying to sort out." The last bit of color drained from Gregory's face as he realized his private rants in his own room might have been overheard. Of course, Dad was bluffing. Our privacy protocols would never allow that kind of surveillance. But Gregory didn't know that. As the team was finishing breakfast, Dad stood up to address the group. "I'd like to propose a small change to today's schedule, if that's all right with Ava." I nodded, curious to see what he had planned. "Instead of the golf tournament, I've arranged for a special team-building exercise. We'll be supporting the island's coral reef restoration project. It's a cause that's very close to my heart, and to Ava's." He gestured to a display that had been set up near the terrace, which hadn't been there before. It was covered with photos of past restoration work, charts showing the reef's recovery, and, to my surprise, several photos of me from over the years, working alongside marine biologists. "What many of you might not realize," Dad continued, "is that Ava has been anonymously funding similar environmental projects for years. In fact, she personally designed the educational program for our coral nursery." A wave of murmurs went through the room as this new information sank in. The Ava they thought they knew, the one they had dismissed as lacking caliber, had been quietly making a real difference in the world without asking for any credit. After breakfast, we all changed and headed down to the Marine Conservation Center, where local experts taught us how to prepare coral fragments for transplanting. I found myself working alongside some of the junior team members who were suddenly full of questions, not just about the coral, but about my marketing strategies. During a break, I saw Gregory standing by himself at the water's edge, just staring out at the ocean. The time had come. I walked over, holding the folder I had brought from my room. "Beautiful view," I said, coming to a stop beside him. He flinched, then nodded. "Ava, Before you say another word," I interrupted gently. "I want you to look at this." I handed him the folder. It contained all the evidence I had compiled: the emails, the meeting notes, the list of reassigned projects, the clear pattern of discrimination, and the instances where my ideas had been stolen. He flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from defensive to utterly defeated as he saw the undeniable proof of his own behavior. "I could take this to the board," I said quietly, "or I could file a formal complaint." "You're going to destroy me," he whispered. "No," I replied. "That was never the point. I'm offering you something else. A chance at redemption." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. Mandatory sensitivity training for all senior staff. A complete overhaul of Momentum's promotion policies to ensure total transparency and merit-based advancement. And your public, vocal support for every single one of these changes. And if I refuse, then yes, this folder goes to the board. But I'm hoping you'll choose to build something better instead of being destroyed. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of the waves. "Why?" he finally asked. "After everything, why would you offer me a way out?" "Because revenge feels good for a minute," I said, "but it doesn't create any real change. Transformation does." That night's closing dinner was held on the beach, with torches and lanterns lighting up tables set right on the sand. As the meal ended, I stood up to speak, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. 4 years ago, I made a choice to hide a part of who I was because I wanted to achieve something authentic I began. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms, not because of my family's name. I looked around at the faces watching me. What I learned instead is how privilege works in quiet ways, even when you try to leave it behind. My time at Momentum showed me the kinds of challenges that so many people face every day, without the safety net that I've always had, no matter how simply I chose to live. Gregory sat there with his eyes fixed on his plate as I continued. Moving forward, Momentum Media will be implementing a whole new set of policies to create truly fair opportunities for everyone. And we will be launching a new partnership with the Sterling Foundation to provide paid internships and mentorship programs for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The announcement was met with a round of enthusiastic applause. Whether it was from genuine support or just a recognition of the new power dynamic, it didn't matter. The seed had been planted. 6 months later, I sat in what used to be Gregory's office, now mine, after his sudden health-related early retirement, and I reviewed the quarterly reports with a deep sense of satisfaction. Under my leadership as the new president, Momentum had not only rolled out comprehensive new diversity and inclusion policies, but we had also increased our profitability by 34%. My office was still simply furnished. No expensive art, no flashy status symbols. My clothes were still practical and well-made, not covered in designer logos. The only difference was that now, those choices felt like an expression of my true values, not a form of concealment. On my desk, there was a small piece of coral in a glass case, a reminder of that pivotal retreat. Next to it was a photo of my father and me, standing with the very first group of foundation interns who had just started at Momentum. The intercom on my phone buzzed. It was my assistant. "Your father is on line 1. He said it's about planning next year's company retreat." I smiled as I picked up the phone. Some things had changed completely, but the most important things had stayed the same. "Hi, Dad," I said. "I was just thinking about you."